All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to day 3 of our guest speaker series. Today we are doing a scouting heritage and talking to members of the BSA that's been around for quite some time, seasoned scouters, 1950s and 1970s. We're going to get started here. So again, my name is John Whitaker. I'm the Camp in the Box director. We got Dan Decker here, who is our Scouts BSA program coordinator. Dan, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation. I hope you guys find this interesting. Scouting has been around for, over 100 years at this point, and there's a lot of history here. And, we have some of the people who have been involved with it in the past here to tell you about their experiences and how scouting was different than what you guys do today and how it's the same in some ways.
There you go. Yes, 110 years, Dan. Come on. 110. So
I said over 100.
So we have a few special guests. I'm going to introduce them, and then Dan is going to take the lead on asking some questions. If you would like to ask questions about their scouting experiences, please put your questions in the chat box. I will be moderating them, and I will get to as many as we can. So today we have George. How do you pronounce your last name again, George? I'm sorry.
George Kuhey.
Kuhey, sorry, George. George Kuhey, who's here from all the way from Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Thank you for coming. And then we also have Mr. Doug Whitaker. There's some relation between myself and him. Hi, Dad. Thank you for coming. I know that you're super old. No, I'm just kidding. I love you, Dad. And Tom Florio, who is lives in Rhinebeck and has been involved in scouting since the 1950s. And we also have another gentleman who's going to be joining us shortly. He's finishing up teaching aviation merit badge, Mr. Murphy. So Dan,
not be joining us today, just to let you know, John.
What's that?
He will not be joining us today.
Oh no. Okay, that's okay. All right. So we have George, Doug, Tom, and Dan. You want to take it away? Actually, if George, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your history.
Yeah, I'm George Kuhey. I grew up in Queens, New York. I joined as a Cub Scout and haven't left the program since. The troop met right next door to the apartment building I lived in, so it was pretty easy to get to meetings. I earned the Eagle Award. I attended the 1977 Jamboree as a Scout and staffed the 1981 through 2010 Jamborees. Most of those were held at Fort APL. And since that time, I've been a Scoutmaster out here in both New York and Wisconsin. And in 2005, I was able to write the Coin Collecting Merit Badge booklet. And that was my profession. I was employed by a publishing company that wrote collector guidebooks. So it's been a fun way to work scouting into my professional career.
Wow, I think we have some people here taking Coin Collecting Merit Badge this week too, right, Dan?
Yes, we do. It is one of the badges we're offering. So.
Oh wow! If we need you week 3, we'll give you a call, George. All right, Mr. Douglas Whitaker, do you want to take a turn, introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Doug Whitaker, and yes, I'm related to that thing with the fur on his face and the messy hair. This is my son. Joined scouting in 1963 on my birthday, and as I say, I've never grown up, never left the program. Received my Eagle Scout in 1970. I've been a Scoutmaster, an Explorer Post Advisor, and Lodge Advisor, and currently a committee chairman of a troop for the last 37 years. And currently I serve as a Senior District Executive of the Rip Van Winkle Council, and I'm the Director of Camp Trimount.
All right, thank you. Mr. Florio, Tom.
Guess I have to unmute myself first. I'm Tom Florio. I started my scouting career as a youth on Long Island. I was in Cub Scouts for 4 years and 1 year as a Boy Scout, and unfortunately, I left Boy Scouting. Biggest mistake of my life. I came back to scouting when my oldest son joined Cub Scouts here in Rhinebeck. Um, so I followed him through the Cub Scout Pack, and then he joined the Boy Scout troop, and I followed him into the Boy Scout troop. And I was an assistant scoutmaster in Troop 128 in Rhinebeck. And then they elevated me to being scoutmaster, and I served in that position for 18 years. My youngest son came into scouting about 2 years after we joined in the mid-1980s, and my wife was his den leader. And when he got to be a Boy Scout, she came into the troop, but she was not the camping kind of person, so she was a treasurer and secretary over the years. Both boys are Eagle Scouts. One just became active when my oldest grandson joined Cub Scouting, and they live in Greenwich, Connecticut right now. And so my oldest son is now a den leader, a Weeblo den leader. And but getting back to me, I serve at the district level and the council level. I'm currently the vice president of programming for the Hudson Valley Council.
Well, thank you so much. Dan, do you want to start us off with questions? And if anyone has any questions, you can type it in the chat. Go ahead, Dan.
Of course. So I think, I believe all three of you said you were part of Cub Scouting, at least for a little bit. So we have a lot of Cub Scouts here in Camp in a Box. So I figure, you know, we start there. That's probably where you started your scouting journey. So do you have a favorite memory from when you were a Cub Scout? Let's start with George.
What I enjoyed in Cub Scouts was not only the crafts, but also skits for pack night. It got me comfortable speaking in front of groups, and it got me to be a ham a little bit.
Thank you. Did you have a favorite skit while we're on the topic?
I'm sure there was a favorite skit, but I cannot name one now. Nor will I sing a song.
Okay. What about you, Mr. Whitaker? What's your Cub Scout experience like? Do you have a favorite memory?
Actually, my only Cub Scout experience is running Cub Resident Camp and Weeblos camps. Never was a Cub Scout.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to you later for some of the Boy Scout questions. But let's jump over to you, Mr. Florio.
I think my favorite part of being a Cub Scout back in the 1950s was the arts and crafts stuff that we did.
Do you have a favorite craft that you made?
I don't remember. It's a
Okay.
long time ago.
Yeah.
So just
on the
curious.
Cub Scout. What's that?
Just curious with the Cub Scouting stuff. Just like how many scouts were with you in your pack back then? Like what was the pack size or den sizes like? And what do you think are the biggest difference between back then in the 1950s versus Cub Scouting now?
I think we had about somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 boys in Cub Scouting, as I remember. The dens were obviously much smaller, maybe 6 or 7 kids in the den. When I was the assistant pack master here in Rhinebeck in the early 1980s, we had over 100 boys in the pack. And of course, we only had about 8 boys in the den that I was involved with. So much bigger pack here in Rhinebeck than what I remember when I was a youth on Long Island.
Mr. Kuhey, would you like to?
The biggest difference, I think now, is you got fat wheels on your Pinewood Derby cars. In the 70s, we had thin wheels.
I think it'd be interesting to see a 1970s car versus a 2020 car, for sure.
They still race well if you built them well.
That's great. That's great. I have a question in the chat here. If you can each answer, what was your all-time favorite moment in scouting? Whoever wants to go first, go right ahead.
My all-time favorite moment of scouting was in 1975 at the Philmont Scout Ranch. And about midnight, 5 of us climbed to the top of Mount Baldy. So we were sitting on top of Mount Baldy at sunrise. That was really the most memorable experience I've had in scouting. It was great.
And for those that don't know, Philmont is a high adventure base in New Mexico where lots of scouts go and go backpacking. So if you ever have the opportunity to do that when you get older and go to Philmont, it's a really fantastic experience. I've been there twice myself. Haven't watched sunrise at Baldy though. I have to do that next time I'm out there. How about you, Mr. Kuhai?
Actually in 1975, I climbed the Tooth of Time. So I got to watch a sunrise at Tooth of Time, which was pretty nice.
Maybe you guys were there at the same time, 1975 both? That's crazy.
First 2 weeks of July.
That's really funny. How about you, Mr. Florio?
I think having left scouting as a youth, when my oldest son came into Boy Scouting, I learned all of the outdoor skills that he learned, basically at the same time. So that's been a remarkable thing for me to have learned. And no matter how old I get, I'm not afraid to learn new stuff.
I think that's very true because you're learning how to use Zoom. You know?
I am.
There you go.
But to do a merit badge.
Right, exactly.
I have a question in the chat here from someone. I'm assuming it's referring to Cub Scouts. Did they have belt loops back when you were Cub Scout for Mr. Kuhei and Mr. Florio? Mr. Kuhei, you want to answer that first?
No belt loops, no dangles. It was strictly arrowheads at the time, gold and silver arrowheads.
What about you, Mr. Florio? Same thing, or?
No belt loops back in my day. I do remember the little arrowheads though.
Another question in the chat here. Did you have a favorite rank? What was your most favorite rank that you earned that you remember? Besides Eagle Scout.
But what else is there besides Eagle Scout?
I don't know. First class, that's an important one. Aero Light. So just Eagle Scout. And there you go. All right. Oh, here's a good one. Do any of you have any favorite merit badges? And also, I'll expand on that. Any favorite merit badges that have been discontinued? Because I know that there's been a number of them that don't exist anymore.
Having left scouting as a youth, Boy Scouting, I don't remember earning any merit badges. But as an adult, one of my favorite merit badges to teach is downhill skiing, snow sports.
I think my favorite merit badge was 2 of them, which is swimming and life saving. I don't think any of the merit badges I took have been discontinued.
Okay.
That's very plain.
Mr. Kuhei?
If you look at my merit badge stash, my first 3 merit badges that I earned was stamp collecting, coin collecting, and railroading. And each of those things are things I still do today. So they taught me life skills, things that I've kept with me for 40 years.
Oh, that's great. Well, especially the collecting part. Absolutely. Here's a good one. Are any of you guys members of the Order of the Arrow?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
All right, and then the follow-up, how was the induction?
Boy, the induction today is much different than the induction when I received it in 1968. There's things that when you, well, I don't know how much I can say with the current audience. It's a lot different than it was in 68.
Yes.
I'm a Vigil Honor member of the Order of the Arrow, and as you get involved in the Order of the Arrow, there's Ordeal, Brotherhood, and Vigil. When you become a Vigil Honor member, they give you a Indian name. My Indian name is Pikpametahe, which means the preacher.
How are you, Mr. Kuhei?
Yes, I'm also in the Arrow, and I was chapter advisor for our district in Queens. And I too am a Vigil Honor member, and my Vigil name is Tishashankawi Mawapo Bambo Nena Jungus Shukachingak Alakwepi Tapa Amawin Wikwam, which is translated as collector.
Wow.
Never fit that on the certificate, I'll tell you that.
They, it's a technical question, but it is on the certificate that way.
Wow. I have a question here. Yes, if you do become a Vigil Honor member, even today, you still get a Native American name. Just like I'm a Vigil Honor member myself, my Vigil Honor name is Geta Megalaman Nikem, which means one who always serves. And I know Mr. Florio, I'm very excited for you, Mr. Florio, because I believe last year you got your brotherhood.
That's correct. Yep.
That's right. So he sealed
After a
through
long
brotherhood.
pause.
Very long pause, and we nagged you until you got it. So
Yes.
that's good. That's good. So thank
I'm
you.
glad
for that.
you did.
All right. So I have a good question in here.
John,
Yes, go ahead.
I think going back to the original question, I think if you know your camping skills, you'll do fine on the ordeal.
Absolutely. Yes. Right. Just remember, the Order of the Arrow is honored campers, right? And it's honor society. So if you know your camping skills, you'll be fine. It's a really great organization. It's lots of fun. A good question. What was your favorite patrol name of the patrol that you were in? Do you remember any of your patrol names?
I was patrol leader of the Panther Patrol for 2 years. It's got to be my favorite.
Panther Patrol. Okay. Mr. Kuhei?
It will not be a patrol name I was in, but if you see Mr. Murphy, his patrol name was the Alf Patrol, which was a favorite TV character at the time.
Oh, Alf. Alf, yes.
Alf.
Okay. Got it. Mr. Florio?
I wasn't.
No.
Yeah, but as an adult, during Wood Badge, I was a member of the Bob White Patrol, and our troop guide was a very small woman. Well, they always picked on her, so we would gather around her to protect her. So we became known as the Killer Bob Whites.
All right. That's pretty funny.
I have another question in the chat here.
Mhm.
What made you guys want to join Boy Scouts?
I joined because my older brother was in Scouts, and I saw him camping and hiking and doing those kind of things, and that's how I joined. He did not stick around, though.
I lived in New York, and big city streets. The troop and pack met in a church hall next door to where I lived. So once a week, I'd always see these kids walk by in uniform. And when I became 8, I said, hey, I want to join these kids in uniform and look sharp.
Mr. Florio, do you know why you joined Cub Scouting?
I joined because my cousin, who was more like a brother to me, and our friends were joining, so I joined too.
All right. That's great. I have another question here in the chat. What is the most favorite skill that you learned in scouting? Favorite skill?
I would say fire building. Because once you know fire building, you can eat well.
Anyone else?
I'm not sure if they heard me. Mine
Nope.
is Dutch oven cooking.
All right, Mr. Florio.
I think the person who taught me this would disagree, but one of the more enjoyable things that I've learned is how to get in a canoe and stay in a canoe and not be afraid of a canoe. I'm not a great swimmer,
Right.
although I've been in the water a lot.
Right. As someone who has flipped a canoe, I can understand that. That's great. That's great. Dan, do you have any other questions on your end?
Yes, I have one here. They want to know what's the longest hike you participated in.
In a single day or in a program of a hike?
They didn't specify, so if you want to answer both, you're more than welcome to.
I'm not sure the specific day was probably 11 or 12 miles, but the Philmont 1975 was 99 miles in 10 days.
Mr. Kuhe?
Again, it's a Philmont thing. It was a 22-mile in one day, and that was because we got on the wrong trail and had to backtrack and take the right trail.
The compass pointed the wrong direction.
It was a new unmarked trail that we ended up on.
Mr. Florio, longest hike?
I've climbed a number of different mountains in the Catskills. But getting back to canoeing, I've been on 3 50-mile canoe trips up in the Adirondacks. And a couple of those trips we finished early, so we climbed a couple of mountains up there.
Great. Another question here. Today has been a very heavy day of knots between first year camper and also our demos. Someone's asking here, what is your favorite knot? What do you guys think? Mr.
The one I
Florio?
can tie.
The one you can tie, okay.
I'm not impaired.
All right. Mr. Whitaker?
Well, then I'm just talking to somebody in Egypt for tomorrow. My favorite knot would need to be the taut line hitch
How come?
because it keeps my tents and my dining flies standing upright.
There you go. Mr. Kuhey?
I too enjoy the hitches, but you know it's knowing which one to use when you need something. They all have specific uses, so it's really you got to know the package.
Right.
I have another.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I have another question here. They want to know, why are you still involved with scouting? What draws you to this program still many years after you've aged out?
I'll go with that one. Scouting has become my second family. I just love all the people that I work with. I love the youth that we get to work with in National Youth Leader Training. I do that every year. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to cancel it for this year. But I just love scouting.
Mr.
For
Whitaker?
myself, I think it's probably a couple of things. One, I think it keeps me young, no matter what my son says, with the activities and the things we do. But as Tom said, it's very much like a family. Our troop has now had 77 Eagle Scouts over the last 30 some years, and they're still family. We still hear from them. We still talk to them. We finally had an in-person troop meeting last night for the first time since March. And even though you couldn't get closer than 6 foot, it was a nice reunion. You see everybody.
Mr. Kuhey?
You realize, I think, that it helped you being in the program, so it gives you the opportunity to help somebody else, but it gives the other participant the opportunity to grow and learn on their own.
That's great. Another question here. Okay, so besides Philmont, what was your favorite field trip or just any type of trip?
My favorite field trip was going to Gettysburg. And that's because I'm a retired social studies teacher.
Mr. Whitaker?
I'd have to say that my favorite trip was every Columbus Day since 1982, when our troop was going up to Fish Creek Ponds in the Adirondacks and canoed for 3 days. Look forward to every year. We just made a reservations for this coming October.
Mr. Kuhey?
For a day hike, New York City offers something called the Lower Manhattan Historical Trail, and it's a 5-mile hike through Lower Manhattan, and it's hits a lot of the historical sites, and that sort of sparked my interest in history as a youth. As an adult, I got to participate in several long trips with the district, and the best one we took was a 30-day trip out to Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, the Tetons, and Colorado Springs. And for a New York kid, that was a great experience.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a really great trip. Wow. So I guess this kind of goes into another question here. It doesn't have to be scouting related, but what is your favorite place in the world that you've been to? Favorite place? Mr. Florio.
Let me think about that. I'll come back to me.
Okay. Does anyone have an answer? Ooh. Robert stumped them. Look at that.
I'd say the Tetons, Teton National Park.
All right.
Big skies, water features, horseback riding. Pretty nice place.
You know, one thing I love about the Tetons, it's really not that far from Yellowstone. There's so many great things right there. Like Wyoming is a wonderful place. Mr. Whitaker?
For myself, thinking back, through scouting career, it'd have to be Philmont. That's why the comment that's always made is I want to go back to Philmont, no matter how many times. And I encourage you guys, you ever get the chance, don't miss the chance to go to Philmont for a trek. It will change your life. It is great.
Mr. Florio?
Favorite thing?
Favorite place?
Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. Lots of history there.
All of the different national monuments that are just wonderful.
So I have another question here. So you guys have mentioned Philmont a lot. Have you guys ever been on any other high adventure treks, and can you tell us about them?
Well, I consider the 3 50-mile canoe trips that we did in the Adirondacks about as high adventure as I could get. The one trip where we ended early and climbed Mount Ampersand, and there were people going up that mountain. This is going back almost 30 years ago now. There was one gentleman who wasn't with us, but it was his second trip up the mountain, and he was just moving along, and he wasn't winded at all.
Mr. Whitaker?
I think other than Philmont, and really weren't scouting experiences, were the times though that I hiked when I was in college in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. They have a thing called the hut system, where you don't have to carry a tent, you don't have to carry your food, you get dinner and breakfast at the hut, and they give you a bag dinner, and you just carry your clothes. But the neatest thing is everything for these huts is carried on the back of one of the hut persons. And you'd see them climbing up, and their packs would go from their knees to 2 foot above their heads. And this would be college kids, male and female, loaded down with food. I think the best one was the 2 that I saw carrying propane tanks up the mountain to run the stoves. And not little propane tanks like the real big ones you have alongside your house. They each had one on their backpack, taking it up to the cabin.
Mr. Kuhe?
I think I would say the National Jamboree programs. Every 4 or 5 years, now they're held in West Virginia. I think they're just great experiences to be with 40,000 like-minded scouts, many of them, some of them from around the world, doing great outdoor skill things.
Yeah, the National Jamboree, I mean, that's just one of those things. If you have the opportunity to go, you should try to go to it. It's as Mr. Kuhe said, that every 4 or 5 years. I mean, I'm a 4th generation scouter, and no one in my family has been to a Jamboree. So
your grandfather was.
Really? Okay. Well, you haven't. I haven't either. But
Yeah.
Still, if you have the opportunity to go, you should definitely go to the Jamboree if you can.
If you're an Order of the Arrow member, a great activity that you can go to is the National Order of the Arrow Conference, which is 40,000 plus scouts of older age, 13 to 18 that are members of the Order of the Arrow. They get together every other year. This year was supposed to be University of Michigan, but they got canceled. And it's a great time of fellowship, learning, and just realizing that you're part of a much larger program with a whole bunch of kids that are your own age.
I got a question here from Robert, who asks, what is the scariest thing you ever saw on a hike? I guess we can expand that to maybe a camp out. What's the scariest thing you ever saw?
My first night at Philmont in 1968, that's when you had old Explorer tents that tied up with 2 little things, no zips. And someone left 30 pots outside our campsite. And when the bear stuck his head inside our tent and sniffed around the first night, it was probably the scariest time.
All right. Mr. Kuhai?
The scariest thing, not necessarily that I saw, but that I experienced, was spelunking, cave crawling in the Adirondacks. And I kind of got wedged into a hole for about 30 minutes that I couldn't quite get out of. So I had scouts in front of me and scouts behind me being very patient.
Mr. Florio?
Mine was with a bear too, up in the Adirondacks. The camp was known for bears in camp because scouts aren't always careful with their food. And one night there was some of the boys came back and said, "There's a bear right over by the bus." So I got up and knowing full well that are they kidding me or not? And I came around the corner of the bus and I almost smacked right into the bear. And luckily I didn't. But I jumped about 2 feet.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
I have another question here for Mr. Kuhe. You were a scout in New York City. Do you think it was a different scouting experience in New York City than if you were in a rural area, and how so?
It's an absolutely different scouting experience. To me, I consider my activities in scouting pretty much kept me off the street and kept me on the straight and narrow, and helped me stay in high school and college and become a reasonably good citizen. Out here in Wisconsin, I have scouts in the troop that take care of cattle, sheep, pigs. They have a hard time getting to meetings because they have farm chores to do. So it's a give and take of your situation. Those kids work pretty hard that have farms, and They're also involved usually in 4-H, and they're pretty happy during state fair time or county fair time when they could sell their pig for $700 or $800 and have some pocket money for the winter.
I actually have a follow-up to that question as well. How did they camp in the city?
Well, Greater New York Council, actually, camping is kind of fun. Since I lived in Queens, I had a small scout troop, 15 to 17 kids, and a lot of them came from single-parent homes. I only had 2 cars available to me on camping trips. So usually the cars took the equipment to camp. Greater New York Council has a camp in the middle of Staten Island called William Pouch Scout Camp. And they also have a scout camp 10 miles north of the George Washington Bridge called Alpine, right along the Palisade. The camp in Staten Island, we could take a subway to a ferry to 2 buses and end up at the door to the camp. And going up to Alpine, you could take the subway up to the George Washington Bridge, then take a bus up to the camp. So usually public transportation was the way we went most of the time, and our equipment would go up on the cars. So you have a plan, and the kids organize the plan, and you work it.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Dan, do you have any in your chat box?
Nope, I have no more over here.
All right. Well, I have one here, a follow-up on the scariest thing you ever saw on the hike. What is the best thing that you've ever seen in any kind of camping or hiking experience? Who wants to go first?
Probably watching a soaring bald eagle.
Okay.
While canoeing.
Mr. Kuhai?
I'd say learning with the group, whitewater rafting out in the Tetons on the Snake River, and then having a great raft day on the river rafting.
Mr. Florio?
Yeah, I enjoyed canoeing up in the Adirondacks, and getting one of the trips we actually got to go through a little lock where you had to pump the water into the lock to raise it to the next level. So that was kind of interesting to me.
That's great. So we have time for one more question. Thank you all for being here with us, and thank you everyone for listening in. If you can tell us how scouting has impacted your life as a whole, and any kind of advice that you can give to these young scouts here in the future, that would be great if you can do that. How has scouting impacted your life, and what advice can you give them? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first. So
Go
guys,
ahead.
some of you are young, some of you are scouts BSA right now, and wondering if I'm going to really take the time, the energy, or the commitment to complete your Eagle Scout. I'm going to tell you the Eagle Scout makes a huge difference to you as you move forward in life. Depending on the college you go to, it'll put you above other applicants. There are colleges such as Paul Smith's College up in the Adirondack that if you're an Eagle Scout, you get an automatic $1,000 scholarship because you're an Eagle Scout. If you decide you're going to join the service, you get a raise in grade that the other recruits don't get because you're an Eagle Scout. If you look at the required things for the military academies and the service academies, large portions of the guys in those organizations are Eagle Scouts. It makes a huge difference. Professionally, wearing my National Eagle Scout Association pin has opened many a door with clients and with fellow scouters, you'd be in a discussion or maybe a debate or a court, and they see your eagle pin and they are also an eagle, and it just forms a bond of fellowship. No matter where you are, you've met them before or not, it opens all kinds of doors, because an Eagle Scout says there's a couple things. One, you know how to make a commitment and keep it. You know how to set goals and make those goals. You know how to set a plan and complete that plan, and that you will just move forward. It says a lot. So just keep pushing on.
Thank you. Mr. Kuhey?
I'd agree with a lot of what Doug said, but I also think just being in the program, yes, there are all sorts of circumstances that may not allow you to finish till Eagle, and I wouldn't look at Eagle as being finished with the program either, but just being in the program as a second class or first class scout, you're still learning life skills that'll help you later on. And that's a lot more life skills than a lot of other younger people are learning.
Mr. Florio?
Well, like I said in my opening remarks, I left Boy Scouting right after my first year of scouting, Boy Scouting. And that was probably the biggest mistake that I've made in my lifetime. So I would urge you, as things get difficult, and sometimes they will, persevere, work through it. Don't give up. Don't make the mistake that I made. And I'm sure you'll go as far as you want to go.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. Let's give a big muted round of applause. Muted. So thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you all tomorrow morning, 8:45 for morning announcements. And please remember to check the Camp in a Box Facebook page for any updates, and be on the lookout tonight for your Zoom links for tomorrow. All right. So everyone have a good night. Take care, everyone. Thank you to our panelists.